பல்கலைக்கழக மாணவியும் நாடுகடந்த தமிழீழ அரசாங்கத்தின் தொண்டருமான அபினா நிமல்ராஜ் அவர்கள் மாவீரர்களை நாமே நினைவு கூற வேண்டும் என்று எங்களோடு பேச வருகிறார்.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for me to call upon the stage our next guest speaker for the day, Abina Nimaraj. She's a university student and a volunteer of the Transnational government of Tamil Nadu.
Vanakkam. Every year, this time of the month is an emotional and moving time when we Eelam Tamils and supporters of our struggle take the time to stop and reflect on the unimaginable sacrifices made by our freedom fighters, our Maaveerar. This includes our brothers and sisters in Eelam who left their dreams behind, separated from their families, and gave up their own sacred lives so that the rest of us could live in peace and freedom in our own land and safe from the enduring political ethnic violence inflicted on the Tamil population and their land by the Sri Lankan state. Following the death of our first Maaveeran, Lieutenant Shankar, on November 27, 1983, the annual remembrance of Maaveerar Naal was first held in 1989 of November 27th. On this first memorial of Maaveerar Naal, 1,307 Maaveerar were respected for their contributions up to that point. Since the death of our first Maaveeran, Tamils have been through a prolonging battle with many fallen lives, sacrificed for achieving political independence of the Tamil population. Included in this legacy, Captain Maladi, our first female Maaveerar. Although I have not directly experienced the pain and hardships faced by Tamils in the midst of the war, I definitely see myself positioned well and be responsible for me to contribute to the struggle for our rights and to demand an acceptable reconciliation path proportional to the immense and irreplaceable losses endured by our people through the war. If it weren't for my parents who were forced to escape the war in Sri Lanka like many other families in Eelam and entered Canada as refugees, my siblings and I would not be here today enjoying the full set of rights and freedoms. If this weren't the case, I wouldn't have been able to grow into the person I am today, gain access to education, a secure shelter, and most importantly, the right to engage and voice my opinion in the political system that I will be governed by. I'm sure this is the case with all of our youth today. We have equal access to rights and freedoms as diaspora Tamils. Unlike every other year, this month of November has a further dimension. The events in Sri Lanka at the top level of governance in the parliament makes everyone concerned about democracy, rule of law, basic human rights, and respect for institutions to feel outrageous. The land and freedom for which our brothers and sisters have sacrificed their lives for remain under occupation by the Sri Lankan armed forces, while the much disliked perpetrator of all that violence, Mahinda Rajapaksa, is using illegal means and brutal power of popular support to take over the ruling of the country, this time as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. The man who used his privilege as the state leader to enact torture, sexual harassment, murders, disappearances, and many more acts of cruel war crimes to tyrannize the Tamil population is trying to get back to power. For many years, us Tamils have been stripped of our fundamental rights and freedoms. The Sri Lankan government refuses to even provide the basic human rights all individuals are subject to. Many instances come to prove the denial of the Sri Lankan government's will to accept the Tamil population, the Tamil people, rightful members of their traditional homeland in the north and east. This is clearly evident from acts imposed from the Sinhalese-dominated government, including the political denial to self-determination for Tamils and the denied access to freely express means of memorialization. Unfortunately, the sacrifices our brothers and sisters have gone through has yet to see any form of reconciliation. As indicated in the 2017 Delayed or Denied report, it has been 9 years since the end of the war, 0 atrocity crimes have been prosecuted or even investigated, 0 fully functional transitional justice mechanisms have been put to place, 0 states have called out for a special court with foreign judges at the 37th United Nations Human Rights Council, and 44 U.S. Sri Lankan military engagement has occurred since the 34th Human Rights Council, which took place in March 2017. The terrorism label given to the LTTE group of Tamil freedom fighters who fought for the peace and freedom of all Tamils in Sri Lanka is a clear depiction of the Sri Lankan government's effort to diminish the Tamil struggle and deny the rights of the Tamil population, forcing them to the status of a permanent minority in their own land. This terrorism label continues to deny any opportunities for the Tamil struggle today to seek the help of international governing bodies. Tamil's right to self-determination, a claim entirely justified under the universally accepted conventions of the United Nations, a major goal that has marked the first non-violent phase of the Tamil national struggle, and then the phase of the armed struggle in which our Maaveerar, who we remember today for their sacrifices. The right to memorialize the contributions of our Maaveerar have great significance in terms of the Tamil struggle of national liberation. In addition to Black July and the May 18 Mullivaikkal remembrance, the Tamils worldwide take the time to commemorate the fallen lives of our Maaveerar and their sacrifices they have made in the years of the armed conflict. Memorialization is extremely important in order to keep our memories alive, to mark the highest sacrifices made by our women and men, and to refresh and recommit ourselves to continue the struggle for transitional justice and accountability, which is being constantly undermined by the national and international bodies of power. Memorialization is not only a means of expressing our honor and respect to the irreplaceable loss of our Maaveerar, it also allows us to examine the past and address the prevailing issues still present in the contemporary society. It helps promote the Tamil community's social recovery from the violent conflict and bring to light the injustices and discrimination the Maaveerar and us as a population have been through. As diaspora Tamils, we have an immense responsibility in commemorating these losses, as we do not have restrictions to the freedom of our expression, as opposed to the Tamils residing in Sri Lanka. Memorialization is a highly politicalized process which reflects the will of those in power. In a place like Sri Lanka, where the governing body which perpetuated the mass atrocities, including the war crimes and genocide, continues to govern the victims, it is merely impossible for Tamils to take part in the process of memorialization. The political setup in Sri Lanka limits the Tamils to be identified as victims and survivors, as the Tamil population has been and still is marginalized. The government not only restricted but also erased traces of Tamil memorialization by destroying monuments and cemeteries of Tamils. Having said that, it is very crucial for the diaspora Tamils to unite and continue to vigorously initiate memorials to promote the learning and critical thinking about our nation's struggle to the international community as well as the new generations to come. We, as the diaspora, have the privilege of free speech, unlike Tamils residing in Eelam, where they have a daily threat of state suppression by the governing body. This was evident, especially in the final stages of the armed conflict, where memorializations were largely suppressed by government forces to marginalize the Tamil community. Although the guns were silenced by the Tamil forces as the war ended in Mullivaikkal on May 18, 2009, the core conflict in Sri Lanka, which the Tamil national liberation struggle stood for, still remains unaddressed, putting the lives of the people and development and rebuilding of the Tamil nation on hold. To reach a resolution to this long struggle with international intervention and mediation, we as the diaspora Tamils have the responsibility to remain actively connected to the international community to intervene and help promote transitional justice and accountability Eelam Tamils deserve. We need to unite all Canadian Tamils, especially the youth, including students and professionals, to come together and take part in memorializing our past through collecting and archiving. The interest we took in the massive protests in 2009 has declined, while the struggles still live on us. As we approach 10 years since the loss in 2009, we must stay motivated to continue and commemorate our past and actively join all movements to depict the ongoing struggle, including many initiatives TGTE democratically pursues to attain justice for the lost lives and struggles the Eelam Tamil population continues to go through. This is not only our will. This is the will of the Maaveerar we have lost in the course of the long-endured armed conflict Tamils have continuously been oppressed through. We need to continue to organize various means of memorials in order to document and archive the mass atrocities the Sinhalese-dominated Sri Lankan government has forced our people to go through. And by this, we must push the international community to aid us in seeking justice and accountability for the victims and survivors of this brutal state violence. With this thought, I would like to end here quoting two lines from the great Eelam Tamil poet, Pudavai Ratnadurai's emotional and meaningful writing about our Maaveerar. உயிர்விடும் வேளையில் உங்களின் வாயது உரைத்தது தமிழீழம் அதை நிறையாகவே இன்றனில் விரைவினில் நிச்சயம் அளித்தாள்வோம் தமிழரின் தாகம் தமிழீழ தாயம்